I found parents to really appreciate the fact that number one, it's the preponderance of experience. It's the majority
Yes.
of the time
Right.
that you are in connection, that you are attuned. And the other key point is that it's about the repair. It
Right.
isn't
Yeah.
about being perfect. It's about how you go back
Hmm.
and revisit. So
Right.
I think that that helps us move away from the idea that am I doing it wrong? Am I bad? All of those judgments
Yeah.
just put more gas on the fire.
Totally. Absolutely.
Really.
Right. And that repair is what is so crucial. And it doesn't have to be in that moment. In fact, usually it's not, and it shouldn't be. Let things cool off first, right? And revisit. And it might be a couple days later. It might be a week later. I mean, I kind of have the mind of it's never too late to repair. Um, And so, those opportunities are there to actually learn and grow from what might have been a really hard experience. And think about the gift you give your child to acknowledge,
Yes.
I,
Yes.
I made a mistake. Yeah.
Sometimes I call them ugly presents. They're this
I love that. Yeah.
this thing that showed up that it really stinks and looks ugly and you don't
Yeah.
want to look at it, but you connect with what was going on inside of you in a
Hmm.
validating, compassionate way,
Hmm.
right? And you begin to reflect on what might have been going on for me, for my child. Then I can move into this idea about what a repair looks like because I've got more clarity.
Right.
And in that
Right.
way, new doors are open, right?
Yeah.
How do you
Yeah.
handle, what do you do when you try to orient parents to the gift of repairing with their child?
Well, I start with that idea that these ruptures, these things that happen, are to be expected, so I really normalize the experience of that, and that doesn't mean you're a bad parent. um and then from there I kind of shift and talk about, like you, with different language, but the gift that can hold, especially if we do that kind of cycle back and repair. But
Yeah.
these are the kinds of conversations, Dr. Kessler, that I think, you know just to pull out a little bit, are best done in that one-on-one experience with a parent. So often parents come to me, probably to you as well, saying, I need therapy for my kid.
Yes.
My kid is really struggling, and it seems so obvious because maybe the kid really is struggling. And I think both you and I share the unique perspective of that might seem on the surface like exactly what's needed. Kid struggling, kid needs therapy. However, it's often not actually, to me, the indicated intervention, right? And so I just want to zoom out and say there's kind of
Yeah.
three things that maybe we'll talk about. One is parent only support,
Mm.
support provided directly to the parent.
Yep.
Um, dyadic support, which would be working with the child and parent together, right?
Mhm.
And then there is child only therapy, right? In my practice, primarily I'm doing dyadic. If my second place ranking in terms of looking at my caseload would be parent only work. And
Mhm.
boy, I think I could count on one hand the number of child only. And
Yeah.
when I say child only, even then it's not child only. There's always consultation and conversation with the parents.
Yeah.
And that's something I feel really passionately about because
Mhm.
there's nothing magic that happens in that 1 hour session with a therapist. I
It's
hate
it
to break it, I mean, I'm not hiding a magic wand. Um,
yeah.
what the magic happens is in really impacting that family system to
Yes.
understand each other's nervous system better, to be aware of the triggers and the tools that kind of go along with what could be activating
Mm.
those nervous systems. That's
Yeah.
where the magic is. But that doesn't happen often in a child only model. That happens in a parent child model or a parent only model. Um, and
It's a
I
big
don't know about,
refrain.
oh, go ahead. Yeah.
It's a big refrain because there's so much
Mhm.
education about play therapy and different
Mhm.
CBT with kids, etc. And I think we're sort of asking the seed to grow on its own, regardless of the
Yes.
environment.
Yeah.
And each child is their own sort of neurological kind of seed. And with the
Uh-huh.
right soil and the right sun and the right environment. In other words, with the right environmental supports, right, we can
Right.
help that, we can nurture that along. So
Yes.
I agree, and it is a bit against the general mode out there.
Yep. Yep. I think we're outliers in that way, and yet I feel really passionately. And I think it's predicated this sort of child only model, and this might be a little controversial to say, but on sort of old thinking that is much more blaming of parents. And I think there's
Mhm.
a model of like, the child is struggling. We need to get them away from the parent, give them the safe space to express.
Yeah,
We, as the professional, are going to support them and help them.
yeah,
And I'm not saying that's everyone's sort of driving, philosophy, but I think it's the legacy of some of the old thinking that really was very blaming of parents. And
mm,
so the idea would be, you want to separate them and support the child without the parent. For obvious
mm,
reasons that isn't going to work because the child goes home to the parent. And so,
exactly.
unless you're really supporting that whole system, when I'm supervising new clinicians, I tell them, I say, unless you're going to take that kid home, you need the parent in the session. And they look at me like, what? What are you talking? I say, what is the point of you figuring out, what helps calm them down? What helps them feel safe? How they best navigate situations with anxiety? What is the point of that
Yeah,
unless you are going to be there 24/7 for them?
right.
You're not.
Which is, we do have the distance, the perspective, and we do have a certain set of lenses we use when we look
Mhm,
at a particular child in terms of
mhm.
adding more, what I'd say, unpacking or deconstruction, that
Of
really is
course.
a gift
Mhm.
to the parent,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
that they can see their child not from their own sense of success or failure,
Mm.
based on the uniqueness of who that child is.
Absolutely. Similar to the idea that parents don't notice when their own kid is growing taller until the pants
There
don't
you
fit
go.
anymore, right? It's just you can't. You're too in it. And so
Great.
that's where that collaboration, right? The lenses that we can hold, that sort of little bit objective, space that we can offer and reflect on with the parents, direct lived experience. I think that's the magic sauce right there is that, combination.
That, and I think a space to deal with the shame, the guilt, and the fear. I think those are,
Yeah.
and the sadness. I'd say those are probably most of what is driving dysregulation in the parent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Absolutely. And so that's where, again, I think it's one of the most underutilized
Hmm.
interventions when we're talking about really complex kids that are struggling in really profound ways. And that is just support for the parent and really giving them that space and that understanding, um, and helping them unpack their own nervous system, their own lived experiences, I think is so valuable. And, it's just so it's so kind of classic, right? That parents say, no, 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 me last, right? No,
Of course.
help my kid. I don't need, I'll come later. And it's really reversing that and saying, no, maybe you come first.
Yeah.
Um, and that's not that your child isn't of utmost importance to you. Of course, he or she is. And yet, if you are really impacted, if you are depleted,
Yes.
we need to shore that up first. We need to fertilize that soil and put that soil before we can expect that seed to grow.
Hmm. And I think that we're so much there's so much more orientation of being a human doing and not a
Hmm.
human
Hmm.
being. Creating
Hmm.
that space to be with an emotion
Hmm.
begins to shift the notion that if my kid is having an emotion, it doesn't have to be scary to me,
Right. Right.
that I can be with it.
Right.
And I think parents often come in, what's the toolbox? What do I need to do Tell me the
Mhm, mhm,
specifics of how
mhm,
to manage. And it's tricky because there is a drive to give some structure and some guidance, which is on that action end,
mhm,
often to give enough space that we'll come back and do more connection. How do you feel about that?
mhm.